The effects of religious values can be referred to in the material world. Similarly, Judeo-Christian values, with regards to the environment, can be understood through external reference, but its attitude towards the environment can said to be typically protean, that is, it is marked by a shift of sentiments, ranging from indifference to assertion to appreciation. Judeo-Christian theology has largely informed the West's treatment of nature and ecology. Both traditions consider God's revelation of His will through a series of laws which a believer should obey to be on the path of justice. The fact that the God has not only created the universe, but also interacts with its spiritually aware creatures, that is men, makes Him God of love too. Accordingly, man should reciprocate the God's love and justice by being loving and just towards His creation. This is, although not a uniform view of what saints and biblical commentators make of it because of their varied emphases. In short, there are three strands of attitude that have been observed as predominant in Judeo-Christian view of the human and nature interface. 1. For Aquinas, salvation being the utmost goal of human life, non-human world should be met with indifference if it doesn't interfere with one's life. As such, sufferings of animals were not a grave issue, they being irrational and soulless, unless it led to habits such as that of cruelty to another human being which can prove fatal to the soul. 2. By contrast, Saint Francis of Assisi loved God's creation to the extent that he is said to have taught birds God's message so that they might also know of His salvation. 3. Finally, Calvinist ethic was applied to the nature which had its influence from a particular command in Genesis whereby God tells mankind to be fruitful, and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it. The interesting thing is not that none of these three strands are correct, but how the use of a scripture-derived morality is susceptible to a variety of contesting interpretations. Also, it has been made possible due to long-drawn Christian history of theological and territorial domination. Each strand can be corresponded with a historical reality in form of a definite material relationship with the environment. Going by the Lynn White's account, it reads each new technological advancement, especially agricultural developments in the West, as developing into certain self-projection onto the environment. Even as early as the mid of 9th century AD, when a new plow equipped with a vertical knife to cut along the furrow lines and a horizontal share and a mold board attached to it came into being, it gave birth to the cultural sensibility where the man was seen as the nature's master. Exploitative tendencies came to be visually celebrated on the Frankish calendar of Middle Ages, representing pictures of active coercion against nature in the form of plowing, harvesting, chopping trees and butchering pigs. According to White, human ecology is transformed corresponding to man's self-projection upon the world around him, driven by his beliefs about his own nature and destiny. It is, although equally true of both the Eastern world and the Western world, but it was truer of the European peasant who pioneered the tilling technology for the ruthless exploitation of the land and soil. Most of all, Lynn has indicted Judeo-Christian value system for the exploitative tendencies towards the ecology. The ability and right to control God's other creations has caused followers of Judeo-Christian religion to develop the attitude that they are superior to their environment, both living and non-living. This notion of superiority over their surroundings also resulted in humans' sense of entitlement over the environment. This strand was brought home in the enterprise of European colonialism in the New World and the African countries. Lynn White identifies the roots of ecological crisis in the too literal interpretation of biblical commands with respect to the appropriation of the environment. White identifies the industrial exploitation of the nature in the same breath. That is, as a consequence of Protestant work ethic, Judeo-Christian religion also shaped humans' attitudes towards their environment and the development of technology through exploration. Christianity provided one of the main motives for early European exploration. Europeans sought to spread Christianity as a means of bettering the world. Early European explorers, even those who were well educated in science and technology, were primarily concerned with spreading their religious views. For example, Jesuit missionaries valued their astronomical skills and ability to repair mechanical contrivances, such as clocks, as means to gain access to rulers, whom they hoped to convert to Christianity. Adas. Therefore, although technological advancement was not the primary focus, religion brought upon the advancement of technology required for exploration, such as ships and maps. Hierarchy was also evident during exploration. Europeans believed that Christianity and the lifestyle that followed Christian religious beliefs was superior to the religions and ways of life of the people European explorers encountered. Therefore, Europeans believed that they were superior to non-European peoples. In Machines as the Measure of Man, Adrian supports the claim that religion was the root of this European sense of superiority. Early European travelers viewed their Christian faith, rather than mastery of the natural world, as their key source of distinctiveness from and superiority to non-Western peoples. This sense of domination over the non-Western peoples led to Europeans' sense of entitlement over the land and creatures that they encountered. Because the people previously in control of the land were of lesser value through the lens of religion, Europeans could justify manipulating the environments that they encountered. Modern Christianity is though moving away from its archaic notions of redefining its relation with the nature in terms of stewardship. It has moved from man-centered approach towards the earth-centered approach in human nature interface. But this attitude towards nature is also informed by biblical axioms. For instance, the earth is Lord's, one of the examples from Psalms, the inference being man is the steward of the God's creation. This notion, as well, does not concern itself much with justice as it uses this as a means to reinforce the theological idea of God's wish being the ultimate point of reference. It implies what is the absolute standard of good and evil from a theological perspective can't be overridden by man as an autonomous rational being. So, in practice, the steward model has been not just as driven for environmental concerns as the Christian bias for the poor has been extended to the earth and its inhabitants such that Christian sense of social justice have been superimposed upon the ecology also. McFaig, hence, calls ecology as the new poor given that the virtue of caring for one's neighbors finds expression in ecology. But the manifestation of such values has not been practically explicit except they tend to theoretically fit into the secular environmental concerns to an extent. On the other side, alignments of many churches in America have been with right-wing parties and their neoliberal economic policies which defy the stewardship principles. Most of the civil rights movements of 1960s defined a structural authority, including that of the church. However, churches have been active in environmental movement where local religious leadership represented the minority and the marginalized. Environmental stewardship has resulted in exploitation and hierarchy. Scripture says that man named all the animals, thus establishing his dominance over them. God planned all of this explicitly for man's benefit and rule. No item in the physical creation had any purpose save to serve man's purposes. Why? Stewardship's notion that humans have the ability and right to control God's other creations has been used to justify the exploitation of natural resources. Even today, Judeo-Christian religion continues to promote exploitation and hierarchy. Religion creates social stratification by justifying poverty and wealth as God's will and creating feelings of superiority of people of a certain type of religion over others. In order to change how humans view their environment, White argues that the doctrine of religion cannot be overthrown, but rather must be rethought. Lynn states that he personally doubts that disastrous ecological backlash can be avoided simply by applying to our problems more science and more technology. White 5. Therefore, instead of using science to address the issues brought about by our culture, we must change the lens through which we see the world.